Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network. Any opinions or comments made by any guest are their own, and they do not necessarily reflect any of the presenters or network's opinions.
It is my firm opinion that these sightings should be investigated most meticulously.
You don't believe that these flying saucers actually exist, do you?
And how can you be so certain they don't, Mr. Chump?
Well, I just don't believe it.
Our minds should be open on all subjects. Wrong conclusions are usually the result of lack of comprehensive analysis.
Of course.
This is Sacha Christie, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for the introduction, Sacha. And Sacha will be back joining me again as a co-presenter for this show. I have a guest on again that was here in the spring of this year, Caz Clarke. Caz is back on the show with her co-investigator and researcher and co-author, Gary Jones. Their book has just come out, and this is what we will be talking about. So just before that, thank you for all the emails that you send. And if you would like to get in touch with me anytime, it's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. That's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. Okay, I shall now bring Sacha back on. Hello, Sacha. How you doing?
All right, mate. I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, you're taking a mick now, aren't you? You Northerners.
Yeah, I'm pretty mental today.
No, you're all right. So you're everything's all running all right up there, is it?
I wouldn't know. I haven't been paying attention.
Oh, yeah. Oh, a bit like me down here then, really.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read, like, at the moment, because, you know, I'm a little bit unpredictable even for me, so I'm just trying to I'm staying off social media. Too easily triggered. Yeah. And, I mean, I might be right about what I'm saying, but, you know, it's just like, I just don't feel like that, so.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I just try to avoid sort of any, I don't know, what you feel like call them arguments or sort of disagreements. Yeah. I just sort of do what I do and just sort of, yeah, I mean, what I do, I just sort of don't take any notice of anything, really. Yeah. You know, same as people don't take any notice of what I'm saying.
I wish I could be that way.
Yeah. But, no, it's all good. But how's the weather been up there? We had a terrific downpour and rain. I got absolutely soaked yesterday when we took the dogs out, Jill and I. It was the sun was out, we took the dogs out and we got absolutely drenched.
Yeah, it's been bad here. But it's been really warm as well, and I hate that. We've had some really warm weather, yeah. Our Britain has got the sense of humour that it has got, that ironic, sarcastic sense of humour because of the weather.
I know. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that's our disaffection.
Yes, September's been better than August.
I know.
And to be honest, I think we're heading into October, which is going to be better than August as well.
It's still pretty warm as well, yeah. Mind you, saying that, I did put the heating on for 10 minutes today.
Yeah, I know.
Just off. I was like, yeah, I'm not quite ready for that yet.
We're on the verge of that. Anyway, tonight we've got Caz Clarke again. We had Caz on the 26th of April, which to be honest, does it seem that long ago to you, Sacha, that we had Caz on?
April.
Yeah,
this year has been about 2 seconds long. It's unbelievable.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, to me, it seems like it was only a couple of months ago, but when I looked, it was 26th of April, and at that time we said, we're going to get Caz and Gari on, and since then a few other things have happened, and of course the book is out now, so hopefully we're going to talk quite a bit about that. So
yeah, that's all.
I think we ought to sort of waste no more time and get Caz and Gari in, shall we?
Come on in from the outside.
Yeah, okay. Welcome to the show, Caz Clarke and Gari Jones.
How you doing?
Hi.
Nice to meet you both again.
Yeah,
nice to meet everyone.
Well, I don't know if you were just listening to Sacha and I. We were just talking. You've got your book out now after a few months ago we had Caz on, and time seems to have flown. But I know at the time, Caz, there was something going on that you couldn't say too much about. Is all that in the book now?
Yes, the majority of it is. This is phase 1 of the investigation complete. We're well into phase 2, which is going really well. In fact, Gary and I never intended to write a book, but it came to my attention that others were going to, so it was actually put together in 4 days. As much as the investigation took 5 years.
Oh, wow, really?
The book itself only took 4 days. But yes, everything is in there. I did speak to Sacha earlier today and discuss some things that I can't say on the radio, but was kind of at a stop when it comes to going to government at the moment. We did have some meetings with some members of the Welsh Senate, and they wanted some of the original photographs that we are unfortunately unable to give them. So that sort of avenue has been closed for us.
Right.
So the next stage will be to put the petition out, and the petition will be to have all of the footage released from all of the aircraft involved that night, as it was just an exercise. Let's all just see it was just an exercise.
Well, that's fair enough, isn't it? I mean, you say it only took you 4 days to put the book out or get the book put together, but you must have had loads of notes and things that you've been working on over the years. So it's more than just the 4 days, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's definitely. It's a 5-year investigation that I put together in 4 days, or Gary and I put together in 4 days, and it's got all of the lies and contradictions that we've been told by the Ministry of Defence, by the police and other authorities. And it's not my words, it's their words, which is the beautiful thing, because it's a prime example of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing most of the time. But everything is in there. You can certainly see that they've lied on multiple occasions. And in one FOI, they actually checked for a second time and confirmed they held no information, but that was a lie as well. So lots of people have heard us talk about the evidence, but not very many people have seen it. It is actually free on Amazon, on Kindle, so people can go and read it for free if you're a member of the library there. Yes.
Really?
Yes, you could. Yes.
There you go, Sacha.
You can read it. You can read it for free.
I'll try it anyway, but I'll definitely get it. I want a paper copy, if there's paper copies available ever.
Yeah. I've got a paper copy here for you if you want one, Sacha.
Oh yeah, that'll be beaut.
I really want everybody to see the evidence for themselves, because it's not Gary's words or my words, it's their words, and that's the beauty of it. And they are the genuine documents. All of the reference numbers are there for the Freedom of Information request, so if anybody wants to look them up, they can. It's part of the public record, and I think you'd be quite shocked at how easily they've been caught out, really.
Of course, as we said before, when you were on the show last time, it was just you, Caz, so we've got Gary on. You were a big part of this as well, Gary, weren't you?
Yeah, it's a 50-50 thing with me and Caz with this investigation, because for the last 5 years we've it sort of started out like, Caz and her friends and neighbours and other people did their stuff, and then I came along and a few others joined in to do parts of the investigation. But since then, me and Caz have, for the last couple of years, came together, and as you can see, the the investigation has gone superbly well. We've put a lot of evidence together. The book has finally come out. The website is there. We've got all these video presentations, and when you actually look at it, you know, we're not the ones lying. We're proving the ones who are lying to us. You know, they keep contradicting themselves, and they keep stepping on each other's toes with the information they give us, or the answers they give us in the FOIs especially. It's just there for everyone to see, and Caz really summed this up quite beautifully. Now, we've proven this case without photographs or videos, and I really like the way that sums up quite nicely here, because, I mean, there's nothing else you can say, you know. I mean, it's all there for people to see. They can scrutinize it all they want, but they'll find out that we're the ones telling the truth. We're proving ourselves, and they're not the ones like the military and the government and the police and they're the ones telling the lies, and we're exposing them for it.
Yeah. Did you and Caz know each other before this, or were you brought together through this?
No, we were brought together through this.
Right.
Caz wasn't anything to do with the UFO community.
No, that's right. I remember saying the last time, yeah.
In fact, when it happened, I had absolutely no clue who to speak to. In fact, I didn't even know you weren't supposed to talk about UFOs. So when the cover story went out from Wales Online, I immediately flew into a comment. You know, I can categorically assure you that was no exercise. And, you know, I obviously felt the consequences of that directly afterwards when I was interrogated. And it was an interrogation. You know, the questions were fast and furious. I didn't have a time at all to think. It was one question after another, you know. And afterwards, I didn't speak about it for 20 months. Not at all.
Yeah.
And it was only when Gary became involved, and Gary and I didn't get on at all to begin with. We locked horns on many occasions, but I'm a strong believer that the truth will always prevail, and neither of us would have gone at this with such tenacity if this wasn't a real incident. And it's not done yet.
There's parts of this explained in the book as well, so if people want to read that.
Yeah.
Why we locked horns and stuff, but, you know, it's just that it was such an incredible event, and the way it was being described, it sounded, and I said this to Caz, it sounded kind of fanciful, and just, it was quite an intricate thing you were describing. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of big UFO cases, like Rendlesham, of course, you know, and Roswell, but this was sounding like something like that, and I was like, you know, but when we finally started to do some, you know, field research, and I knew where to start looking with the military and stuff, it was all just coming together, and I was like, wow, this, you know, Caz is really being truthful here. It's amazing. And since then it's grown, you know, it's become what it is now, the book, website, and a very big case indeed.
Yeah, I think we ought to kind of, because I mean, there could be people out here listening who don't know what we're talking, or what you're talking about. So maybe we could go right from the beginning, how it all set out, you know, how you came together, and perhaps what you saw and what you experienced, you know, for any listeners that are new to this. And obviously it's going to be something that would probably lead them to get your book if they, you know, so wish.
Should I start?
Yeah, please do, yeah. And then you can sort of say how you two came together and everything, and fire away.
Okay, well, it's called the Pentyrch incident because it began here. And for 3 days and 3 nights, we had 2 surveillance aircraft that took it in turns to monitor the skies above our village. We had contacted the Ministry of Defence and the mainstream media, and nobody seemed to know anything about it. In fact, the Ministry of Defence actually ignored us. And by the 3rd night, it was quite apparent that they were watching for something, but we certainly didn't expect to see what happened. I had no belief in UFOs. In fact, one of my neighbours, David, actually thought that they were watching for Russian planes because it was only the week before that we turned away 2 Tu-160 bombers from our airspace, Russian bombers. But what pyramid, the jettisoned smaller craft, 2 of which approached us afterwards. The military had set an ambush for it, pursued them and fired upon them without first trying to establish any form of peaceful communication. One of the objects that they fired upon did actually crash into Smilog Woods. The EMF evidence that Gary has found has been quite phenomenal and double-checked. I actually contacted the Welsh UFO Network to begin with because I had no clue who to speak to about it. It turned out to be a one-man band, Mr. Lee Thomas, who put me in contact with a man called Richard Hall. I didn't know who Richard was, but I understood that he was doing a conference in Merthyr that Sunday, the 28th of February. This happened in the early hours of Friday morning. And I decided there and then that was it. I was going to go and see Richard. I didn't know what he looked like. I had no clue whether or not I was going to be able to speak with him, but I was determined to go and at least try. I spoke to Richard before the conference started and explained to him what had happened. And he offered me to speak to his audience at the end of the show to ask if anybody else had seen or witnessed anything. At the end of the show, that's exactly what I did. I'd never spoken publicly before, and Richard was stood in front of me, passing me the microphone, and I stood up and told the entire audience what had happened, and Gary just happened to be there that night. Half a dozen other witnesses stood up. Some said that they saw other lights flying around in the skies. Others heard the explosions. Others, too, found it difficult to get home that night because the uniformed police had closed all the roads. A member of staff from the Royal Glamorgan Hospital said that they felt the explosion, that the explosion was so huge, an air explosion, that it shook the building down to its foundations, and the smoke that came from the explosion was so dense, it came in through the windows and through the vents and filled the corridors of the hospital with smoke. This member of staff has gone outside, and the smoke was falling from the air, and it was so dense it resembled a foggy night. Well, he was told that the switchboard had been called directly after the explosion and told that the hospital services were not required, that this was just an exercise. Well, nobody had any prior notification of this exercise at all. There's no digital or paper record of this exercise. And certainly, the hospital definitely didn't know, but they have since tried to do an awful lot of backfilling, as well as South Wales Police. They told us that they couldn't find any evidence of the road closures, yet they know which officers were involved. I'll pass you over to Gary so that he can continue from there, but that's basically what happened that night.
Yeah, this is actually the very first time I ever met Caz Clarke or knew of who she was. Yeah, I went to the Merthyr Tydfil Rugby Club, and I was listening to Richard D. Hall's presentation because I always thought they were good presentations, and then at the end there was a Q&A session. What was interesting is that 2 days prior, of course, we had the major incident that Caz and Dave had witnessed, but I didn't know nothing about that. I just knew that the military had been building up in the area for quite some time, low-flying helicopters, planes, convoys of trucks and, army vehicles, and I was like, what is going on? Yeah, everyone was asking the question. Everywhere I went in Merthyr or Ponty or in my hometown. But, of course, we get to Merthyr and then we get to the Q&A session. Caz gets a hold of the microphone, and sometimes people ask, what was her demeanour like? And I say, well, she was quite calm and she was quite collected, but you can tell she was quite full of adrenaline. She had been through something quite incredible. And she told that audience, I can't remember exactly the words, but that there was this UFO event and that the military were involved and there was this large explosion and all these other things, and everyone's literally just, I can remember this much, right? Everyone just stopped, turned over and looked at Caz, and I could smell the excitement in the room. It was like, wow, And some of the guy who was in the audience talked about how the hospital had shaken, because of some loud explosion, filled the rooms with smoke or some thick black smoke, It was quite incredible that people were saying all this. And obviously from there, I wanted to really get involved in this. But Caz was being surrounded by so many people. So it was quite difficult for me to get to her. So I just realized I have to get going because my lift is waiting outside. They have to get up early and the time was getting on. So I just thought, okay, I'll get on computer tomorrow because no doubt now this is going to be talked about. And hopefully I'll find Caz that way. But like I said, I tried looking for Caz online. Couldn't find her anywhere, especially on Facebook. I'd type her name in. I'd go to the UFO groups and all these other social media groups that were interested in Richard D. Hall or UFOs, and nobody would find or knew about Caz Clarke. it wasn't until like October 2017 that finally contact was made, and from there, you know, I would say the real investigation began, although I'd been doing my own work previously, trying to find bits and pieces of what I could find. I found some things, but I didn't find much. It wasn't until I got in contact with Caz and Dave and Donna and Steve, you know, when they gave us so much information that then it was like, okay, now we got something, let's go find it. And of course, we did we did EMF scans, metal detector scans. I went online and had a look for the military and online comments. And from there, you know, me and Caz, of course, as Caz would say, we were locking horns a couple of times. But once we started to see how it was all shaping together, that what Caz had said and what David had said in particular, it just, yeah, it all came together, and it was good, you know. We started to do our presentations and started to make our findings public, and it really just showed the world, it really showed the people who were listening that, you know, there was something incredible here. And of course, we did our first presentation, and it's been growing ever since. So if Caz wants to come back into this one, she can tell you where it went from there.
Well, initially I didn't want to come forward at all. I only spoke to a small UFO group in Wales because they told me they just wanted the story for their collection, shall we say. And I placed so many conditions on them that they must come alone, not to record me or photograph me. But that's not exactly what happened, but I didn't find that out until much later. And I was actually betrayed on the very first day, and they outed me and placed me in such a difficult position because certain people had contacted me via my Facebook page and asked if they could come out and view the site. And I've met these people and showed them where it happened. I haven't photographed these people or recorded them. I believe that people have a right to anonymity. And I was contacted by somebody again via my Facebook page, and this guy turned out to be military. I'm not joking when I say that my family and myself was threatened with perhaps a fatal car accident. You know, accidents happen all the time. But it was the way that it was said. I was asked what it was that I wanted.
Accidents happen?
Yes, he said to me, wasn't I worried about what was going to happen to me and my family? Didn't I know that accidents happen all the time?
Sounds a bit like the bullets are cheap, didn't it, Sacha?
It does, yeah. Yeah.
You know, what was it that I wanted? And I said I didn't want anything for myself. I felt that I was on borrowed time anyway. I began to have some very strange health issues that I hadn't suffered before. And they were little things at first, so I didn't quite connect everything. You know, like suddenly becoming allergic to the coatings on a vitamin tablet that I'd taken for my entire life, to becoming anaphylactic when I wasn't before. And as I say, I didn't connect it initially until I nearly died New Year's Eve, 2017. And then it occurred to me that all of these changes had happened since that night. Because this thing turned my hair completely white. On the morning of the 27th of February, it could be radiation that's done that. I've just read a scientific paper now where they've exposed mice to high doses of radiation and their hair or fur had gone white. Where I wanted to remain anonymous, suddenly I wasn't anymore. And the military clearly knew who I was, and I had the BBC Unexplainers contact me via my Facebook page and asked me to go on their show, and I said no. And a member of this small UFO group in Wales actually went on to the same programme, so I know where it came from. But I discussed it with Gary as to what I should do, and he said, look, you know, the more public you are now, the safer you'll be. And we had multiple discussions about it, and then it was decided, even though the investigation was far from complete, that I had to go around the country with him and present the evidence that we had. And now it's a lot more complete. And if it wasn't real, I wouldn't have sat 3 lie detectors. You know, a lot of people don't believe in polygraph tests. But they do actually say whether or not you're being deceptive. It doesn't say whether or not you're telling the truth or, you know, but it will detect if you're being deceptive. but I had to choose the right polygraph examiner. They had to be the best. And I tried the best in Europe first, and Gary was present with others when I spoke to this gentleman who actually inferred that he would fail me before he even tested me. His words were actually, Caz, you're not going to get the answers you're looking for.
That's practically what he said.
It was so hard to get a polygraph examiner to agree to test me that when I eventually did find a company that was prepared to do it, I actually refused to discuss the content of my test with anyone but my examiner. I thought by the time I'd paid for it, was wired up to the machine, it'd be pretty hard for them to say, I'm sorry, but we can't test you. But I did it primarily for my doctors, I think, because I needed them to take me seriously about what had happened to me and why my health was deteriorating. But I knew that it would help the case as well. And actually, when the results came through, I had a house full of people, and Gary was here as well. And it actually came through via my email first. And I remember the day that I opened the email where it said, truth or no deception, and I just burst into tears because it had been such a battle for somebody else to believe me, to know that I was actually telling the truth. It was just a relief to know that at last somebody else in the world knew that I was being honest about this. And if I wasn't, then I wouldn't have pushed this investigation so hard and challenged the Ministry of Defence and challenged the police and other agencies. And so much so that we've tied them in knots now, to the point where we've actually got South Wales Police in a situation where they can't answer us, so they're trying to hide behind exemptions that don't actually apply. So we're going to write back to them now and give them one last chance to tell us, or at least answer our questions, and if they don't, we're going to write to the Commissioner and hold them in contempt of court. And that's a criminal act, so they could be facing criminal charges. But that's how real this is. You know, I think the petition is our last hope of being able to have questions asked in Parliament. And we will do a 30-day countdown for that petition, which will be on the website. There's also a safe space on the website for witnesses if they want to come forward. They don't have to give their real names. If they want to remain anonymous, they can. If they just need to speak to somebody, I have counsellors on standby waiting to take their call. Some people, you know, like for myself, for example, I had no one to turn to. Absolutely no one. And I did and still do have post-traumatic stress. And I had no one to talk to about it. And it's a really difficult thing to go through on your own.
Isn't it amazing that all of the people that say that they're doing something good and doing something about the UFO issue, the abduction, you know, problem, and there's literally nobody there. There's nothing. There's nothing. That was the shocker for me when I first came to the UFO community, and I was looking for someone who just listen or be interested, you know, like, because you would think that the UFO community would be interested in a UFO event, and it was just none of the above. I was so angry. Like, what the hell has everyone been doing for 17 years?
Right.
You know?
That's one of the things that's really got to me a little bit, that I've only been involved in the UFO community for 5 years. And in that time, it seems to me that everybody is interviewing everybody else, and it's all the same stories going on over and over again, but no one is doing anything. No one is doing anything. Gary and I, we've tried to take it to government, and we've been blocked by a UFO group that have these supposed original photographs by a witness that night who wishes to remain anonymous, but they will not give us the originals to authenticate. We have MPs asking for those photographs so they can be authenticated.
Is it mad? You brought this forward, and you know, you put this case to a point where people were saying that they didn't believe you, but then and people saying that who didn't believe you said that there's a better witness now. This thing turns your life completely upside down, and then all you've got is a load of people trying to cannibalise you and steal your evidence, and, you know, it's outrageous. And this is just what the scene is. It's so toxic.
You're absolutely
It's
right.
dangerous.
You're absolutely right.
You know, literally, I mean, I have felt suicidal at times, not because of what happened to me, but because of people.
I've been attacked by trolls and debunkers for the last 5 years. And as I've said before, and I will probably say it again, if this was just a story, I'd have written a novel and put it under fiction, and I wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. But this is the truth.
You have your little group of believers around you, and that's what they do. They just feed into a certain set of people, and some people will accidentally get involved in it and then realise it's a load of tosh if they're just story spinners, and then they'll move on but won't make a scene. And even if they do make a scene, that whole group of people will cannibalise that one person making a scene.
It's always the witnesses that are attacked, and yet the presenters need the witnesses' testimony to be able to present it for the glory.
Yeah.
And for me, that is wrong. We need to come together as a community. Personal feelings should not come into this. We need to stand together. It's time that we approached our government with a petition with at least 10,000 signatures and demand the truth. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I want questions asked in Parliament about this.
Yeah. Well, I think questions have been asked in Parliament before, but they weren't pushed. I mean, we've literally got, it's been on the news now, you know, the whole thing with the Pentagon. Yeah. So, you know, why can't we have these questions asked? Why do we even have to have petitions?
Right. What I find dangerous is that the Ministry of Defence did a secret study of UFOs called the Condine Report that you're probably both aware of. And they lied to Parliament and said that they had no interest in UFOs, that there was no study. So they lied to Parliament, they've lied to the mainstream media, and they've lied to the general public about it, and it was real. And then multiple times they stated within that Condine Report that UFOs are of no defence significance and are not, repeat, not a threat. So how they can hide behind Section 26 defence is beyond me.
I think the thing is they may have publicly lied to the Parliament, but they probably were talking behind the scenes with them of the sort, you know.
We would like to think.
Yeah.
Because what they did that night affects everybody. You know, the military do not own this planet. You know, our elites do not own this planet. It belongs to all of us. And what they did that night involves every single human being on this planet.
Yeah.
I think we deserve them.
You know, there's been quite a few large UFO incidents. When they are large objects, how are they not? How do they not know? I mean, that is outrageous. When we saw that in Wales, it was absolutely freaking massive. Yeah. Afterwards, I was just like, they must know. They can't not pick that up on radar somewhere with something, you know, or even coming into the atmosphere, coming out of the sea or whatever. What the hell? How can they not know? I don't believe that they're unaware.
They know.
Just ridiculous. They know.
They know, of course they know.
26 indicate that something did occur, but they just can't talk about it. Otherwise, they would just say there isn't any information on that.
Well, I had the Ministry of Defence on the 4th year anniversary presentation that Gary and I did here in Pentyrch. And on that particular night, it was a very poor turnout because the weather was extremely bad. And so they actually stood out as someone that I'd never seen before. And they did say that they were there for personal reasons, but I mean, if they were there for personal reasons, why say they were from the Ministry of Defence? You know, it didn't make sense. But in fairness to them, if they were, as in every other witness, I will not disclose what they looked like, only to say that it was one man and one woman. And the man was trying to say to me, or perhaps what you saw was a drone, thinking that perhaps I'd seen these objects from a distance. So I said, well, unless they can make drones the height of this room, you know, and 6 feet wide, can fly completely silently and change colour, then I'd have to concur. I said, but I'm yet to see us build a pyramid that can fly. and his head dropped. But afterwards, she came up to me, the lady, and she took me by the hand and she said, the Minister of Defence do know. I said, well, I know they know because I was there and I saw them. And she said, I wish there were more people like you in the world that would stand up. She said, because the people should know the truth. And when she walked away from me, it was like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I suddenly felt quite sorry for these people, that they're in these positions where they're forced to lie. And that needs to change, because this involves everyone. And I said in my very first speech, you know, they can release 95% of it. And perhaps there's 5% that people aren't ready to hear. But it needs to be said.
No,
you know, people need to know the difference. If we have enemies or there are hostile extraterrestrials, then we should know the difference. So if there are hostiles, perhaps there's a hotline that we can phone and say, well, actually, you need to get your butts over here because this is going on. But
right, listen, I was sat with a taxi driver once, and I mentioned, we were talking about wherever, I was probably going to a conference or something, and mentioned aliens, and he freaked out, and it was genuine, almost panic, where he demanded that I not speak of it because he was too frightened to even think of it. So that is a solid baseline of people who are not involved. We all think that, you know, we're all ready for this, but most people haven't even got a clue, don't even know what Roswell is, you know, unbelievably, but, you know, a lot of people are not even thinking that this is even a possible reality or are too frightened of it. So I'm not convinced, especially with our governments and the way that they handle things, that the truth is going to be helpful. I just think it is. No, I don't mean that religions would collapse the banks and blah, 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 all that. I mean, people just tend to be frozen in places with their, you know, own apathy all the time. But, you know, it's a bit much if you've really never even thought of it before.
I agree. We need to come together as a race. We're not the only ones, and it would give our children direction. You know, we're not top of the food chain, and it's high time that we were told that.
I've got kids around me all the time. They're not frightened of the idea of it. It's the older people, you know, that seem to be freaked out.
I mean, if they release the technology, we could inhabit other planets, you know, overpopulation problem just about solved. It would steer our children into the sciences that they will need for space travel. I'm not saying that everybody would want to, but certainly that's the way the human race is going.
Well, definitely going in that direction, isn't it? So, yeah, and kids are born with all of this stuff at their fingertips. You know, people, I still see people saying, kids today, they don't know. No, I'll tell you what, we don't know we're born. They're the ones who've grown up with this.
Yeah.
The fingertips from little babies. You see mums have to give babies their phones because they're all flashy and shiny, and the babies just won't leave you alone. So they get their phones from being like 6 months old, and then they can figure them out from that age. I've had 5 children, 2 grandchildren. I've watched them doing it. So, you know...
We didn't have that technology when I was growing up, you know. I mean, mobile phones, you have to have a separate handbag power pack for it, you know.
I didn't even have mobile phones when I was growing up.
Exactly. You know, technology has come on leaps and bounds. But I think it's time that we were told that we're not alone. I think the Pentagon have done the right thing. They're slowly drip feeding the mass public that UFOs are real, but they're not saying where they're from or who they are or what they're doing. And they do know. Ross Coulthard, I spoke to Sacha earlier today, he actually publicised the fact that the United States Air Force are monitoring a frequency to know when these, quote, UFOs are going to appear. Because I'd always questioned, how did they know that these craft were coming here specifically? And they are monitoring a frequency. The satellites are in communication with the E3 Sentries, the AWACS planes, directly, so they can steer this I-Star project directly to where they need it to be. So all the reconnaissance and surveillance aircraft, the 2 E3 Sentries, one of which is from NATO, is always involved. and whatever else they need. There's this huge, I think there are 28 task forces worldwide that are dealing with this phenomena 24/7. So that tells you how big this is.
Yeah, I mean, and that should be on mainstream media, shouldn't it? I mean, nobody ever talks about it on mainstream media unless they want to take the mickey out of it.
Well, right.
I think, with the types of people that were involved in Arctic, they've put a serious conversation on the table and less giggling, So I think, if anything, we might not have really got disclosure or anything near it, but I think this whole bubble of stuff has elevated ufology from the gutter, which it still deserves to be because it's terrible, but the discussion is now high end. You know what I mean? It's not just Joe Blogger. So I think that's our best takeaway from all of that at the moment.
Yeah.
Indeed. And, what have the military done? This is the point, that they've been shooting these things down since the 1940s, as far back as I can go, but maybe before then. And that is an act of hostility on our part. I think they were targeting radar on them in the 1940s and discovered that brought them down.
Yeah, I heard that.
Are we in trouble? Is that why that, suddenly we've got Space Force and in the public eye, I mean now, not the secret Space Force, but an actual Space Force that if you join the Air Force, you can actually be part of. They're doing all of this without our knowledge and without our consent.
And we pay for it.
That is a very dangerous situation.
Don't we?
Yeah, well, there's other stuff going on as well that is far more sinister. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, indeed. They have been visiting us since ancient times. I mean, there's so much ancient evidence that these people from the stars came here. But there's also a lot of negative stuff that's going on. People are being abducted. And some people are not returned.
Well, thousands of people disappear every year, don't they? In fact, probably get into the million every year.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of people.
Well, they reckon it's millions of people, don't they? Millions of people go missing every year. We don't know why, but so many of them are never found again. We don't know where they've gone.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons why, but there's such a massive volume that it makes you think.
I think Senator Richard Blumenthal said it best in the Senate hearing with General Dunford when they were going for the funding for Space Force. And it was the way in which he said it, rather, we know what they are doing. Our adversaries know what they are doing, and they know that we know what they are doing, but the American people have no idea. And if they did, there would be some great concern. We're all human beings, and we are one race, and if anything happens to this planet as a whole, we can wave bye-bye. But I think people are at risk. I think we would be foolish and naive to believe that all life forms are benign.
Some families are destroyed by this stuff.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I'm speaking as coming from one, being the matriarch of one destroyed family because I was destroyed by all this.
Yeah, you had an horrific experience, Sasha.
Never mind life as well, all the that went on in my life. It's just this in like normal life.
Yeah, and attacks for it as well. Yeah,
it's just too much. It's too much, and people malfunction carrying the burden of the knowledge of this phenomena and some of the surrounding subjects. And people on the scene are damaging. The whole thing is just shocking.
Yeah.
I am shocked.
It's changed my life completely, immeasurably, forever and ever. And you can't do anything about that. You've got no choice now. It's just been landed on you. Here, have that. And then people are going eat about you because they don't like the way you talk or act or whatever. Oh my God, that is not even the point. What matters is what is happening.
Some people have said to me, how can you recall with such detail? And I've always said, well, if you have had a traumatic experience in your life, doesn't matter what it is, you will remember that day in detail. whatever that trauma is in your life, you'll remember.
Forever, and it will play every day in your head forever. Like, you know, how can you remember? Well, I can remember because my brain won't let me forget, actually, because just every single hour of every single day for years, it's just going to play out over and over and over again until you're just completely insane with it, you know. That's what it does. Unless you can get the counselling, unless you can afford to get help, or if you somehow just manage to be okay with it. But some of us are just not okay.
This happened on my doorstep, literally. And it will always be there. And I can't escape it. I just can't. And I've been placed in a situation now where I have to go forward. And I will for all of us. I will go and keep going and keep poking the bear until I get an answer.
Because your brain won't let you leave it alone. Your heart won't let you leave it alone, you know? And people go about motivations. I don't have a motivation. I can't stop myself. It's not even me wanting to even do this because I really don't. I hate it. I hate everything that is done to my life and everything that it's left me with. But I've got no choice because I'm just stuck with it as a permanence, you know, and it can override everything in my day. I have to find ways to override it because it just saturates you, it changes you, and you just feel driven to do something. It's not even planned, it's not calculated, I just got to do something because I can't sit here not doing something. I don't even know if anything that I ever do makes any bloody difference to anyone. It just helps me get through it and get on with it, you know, I mean, literally with it, because I've no choice. I can't put it down, I can't pretend it never happened.
Right,
you know,
and that's what post-traumatic stress does to you, and this is what people don't get, you know. Like I've tried to say, well, if there's a war veteran who's suffering with post-traumatic stress, he can come home and get counselling and he can get help. You know, but you put that war veteran back into a war situation and he's going to go straight back into PTSD. You know, there's no profit in the book for me at all. I didn't do it for profit. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on Kindle for free. I did it because everybody has a right to know the truth. And I want the people to see the evidence, which is why it's all in the book. It's not a story. It's a presentation of the evidence in their words, not mine.
I think I think most of us know that very few people make a lot of money out of ufology. You know, there's only the very few names that might sort of make a good living out of it. I don't know of any that make an awful lot of money. And as you, Sasha, and we know quite a few people in the business, don't we? If you want to call it a business, it's very important to have you and Sasha, you know, Caz and Sasha on the same show together because you both suffered a lot of stress and trolls on Facebook, etc. And I think Gary did to a certain extent as well, didn't you, Gary?
No, I've been attacked and I've been trolled and I've had my abusers and this and that. But to be honest with you, it's like water off a duck's back to me now because I've had it for so long. I just don't pay attention to it. Because what can you do? Well, they're going to say what they want to say. They're going to do what they want to do. And there's nothing more. And, you know, you can block them and this and that. But I don't feed them. I don't feed the troll because at the end of the day, they just want a reaction. They'll use any little word or any little sentence and they'll forget the whole story, you know, or the whole... just look for one little thing and that becomes the basis of their argument. So I just don't bother with it. I find myself, I've come under more of attacks on my machine, you know. I've noticed that certain things have either been hacked or... There's so many computers since I started working with Caz on this, funny enough. I've had several hard drives and computers go funny on me, even though they were all... Some of them were brand new as well, and... You know, it's just like, what's going on here?
I think someone tried to hack you just now because you went quiet.
My machine.
I'll just read a little bit from the back of the book in my summing up. And I've said, the evidence is vast in this case, and I would ask you to scrutinise it closely. The truth is right here, and I ask you to find it within these pages. If there is nothing to hide, why have they lied and lied again, and in some cases confirmed for a second time, and still lied? I put it to you, not only have the authorities lied in this case, and have covered up the truth, but the military knowingly and expectantly intercepted and engaged a huge pyramid UFO and the craft it jettisoned that were not hostile, and without trying to first establish any form of peaceful communications, pursued and fired upon it without mercy. It is time for true disclosure in this country and across the world. Time to at least try to correct what has been done before it is too late for us and our children, our planet, and the entire human race. I ask you to be my judge and jury in this case, and to seek the truth in this matter, and to find the only answer that really does make any sense at all is the Pentyrch UFO incident of 2016, above and beyond any reasonable doubt, was real. But that's just I could go into some of the evidence and some of the lies that they've told.
Yeah, would you like to give us a couple of samples of that? I mean, you don't want to give too much of the book away, of course, although you can read it for nothing on Kindle.
I'll just read this very quickly then. If I asked you to be a jury member in a court of law, I would ask you to set aside your personal beliefs and try this case on the evidence put before you. I would remind you, the jury, if a witness lies, you can throw out all or part of their testimony, but which part would you believe? If multiple witnesses are caught lying under oath, it is a conspiracy to cover up the truth. No official governing body or emergency service received any prior notification. National Resources for Wales lied about why the trees were felled in Smailog Woods. There is no plant health notice. The police lied about any knowledge of road closures that night, whilst knowing which officers were involved. The Ministry of Defence have lied on several official government documents multiple times, and this is part of the public record. They lied about having any knowledge of the planes over Pentyrch in the preceding days. They lied about hovering low over people's homes in the early hours of the morning. They lied about exceeding the NOTAM by at least 50 miles, something they would never do. The MOD lied about sending a clean-up crew to the fields of Pentyrch and lied about their identity whilst in the fields of Pentyrch. The MOD lied about knowing who the people were in the fields of Pentyrch, and when checking for a second time confirmed no information was held, but that was a lie too. They also lied about the simulated munitions causing the explosions that shook people's homes and the hospital. And the answers they did give all fell within the realms of Section 26, not in the public interest. Well, I believe it's very much in the public interest, and these are all things that we can prove. Those are just some of the lies that they've told.
I mean, you certainly laid it on the line there for them. Are you going to be sending a copy of your book to the police, etc., let them read what you've said?
Not until we finished our investigation, and it's still ongoing. Gary and I at present are in the middle of doing the second phase of the investigation, because there's been an awful lot of backfilling attempted by the Ministry of Defence and the police and the hospital. And so we're in the process of dissecting that, it just gets funnier as you go along. You know, the more lies they tell, the deeper the hole. Yeah. And the deeper the hole, they're just ending up burying.
Yeah. Can I maybe just, there's something not in the book, but something that I was working on now. Very interesting, show. We did a show with, Kev Baker one time, and Caz introduced a really interesting piece of evidence where you found that, the Forestry Commission had felled an area that was not supposed to be felled in it. They said it had larch disease in that area, but you found the maps and the pinpoints of years they were supposed to be cutting things down, and there was nothing for that area where the impact site is, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I was looking on a couple of websites, and I was wondering about this Beechcraft King, or 350 King aircraft, the one we call the Snake 48, or ZZ418. Now, I found a very interesting page, and I've actually managed to locate it here, because I remember when we were doing our initial searches online, I found a section on the wave. Was it, Karen? That's it, yeah?
Yes.
A lot of the story had been deleted, but somebody had posted it on Facebook, and the comments were all there, and some comments were on other places, and I found someone named, Moira, I'll just call it that. The name is in the book. Now, her father was a patient at the hospital, and he recalled hearing gunshots, not missile or big bangs. I mean, that did happen. But before that happened, he recalled hearing something like machine gun fire. Now, this man worked in the RAF, and he knows the sound of what these things sound like, and he was quite unnerved by this. Now, it was around the time that, after the Pyramid craft left the area, and the Snake 48 plane had gone over to the Smailog Woods area, because Smailog Woods is quite interesting. If you didn't have the Pentyrch field, Smailog Woods would be a very interesting case on its own. You'd have a lot of evidence there. And what I've discovered here is that with this plane that we're talking about, Shadow R1 is sometimes what it's called, it's so secretive, and there's not very much known about the kind of capabilities this plane has. But I did find something on Raytheon's Air Force Technology website, and it tells me that this particular system has something called infrared system, synthetic aperture radar, inverse synthetic aperture radar. That's quite a lot to go into, but the basic thing of it is, it says on one website here, ISAR technology uses relative movement of the target rather than the emitter to create the synthetic aperture. It says the ISAR antenna can be mounted into airborne platform. Alternatively, ISAR can also be used by one or more ground-based antenna to generate, this is 2D or 3D radar image of an object moving in the field of view. Now, this particular radar can cut through cloud, foliage, forest, and any other thick area, right? And it can create a 2D, 3D radar image of something in the area. Now, this is what I'm getting at. Caz showed that in the radar returns when the plane left the Pentyrch fields, it went over to the Smailog Woods area. It circled that area, and the circles got smaller, didn't it, Caz?
Yes.
Okay, right. Now, this is two interesting points here, right? We've got the EMF trail that follows into the impact site, but also if you follow it back, it goes to the Royal Glamorgan Hospital where that big explosion happened and all the buildings shook and the smoke and everything. And Lancaster and Commons to the right of on the map anyway. The point I'm getting at here is that it's very likely, and I would even say this is true, that green object that managed to distract all the other planes and led it over northwesterly, the one that fired the 3 strobes, Caz?
Yes.
I've said, right, that this is how I piece it together, that it went that way. It must have, I do strongly believe it hid in the woods, because as soon as the plane that was circling, the one that was Snake 48, it immediately went over to that area, and the circles got smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it seemed all the aircraft got to that area, and one of the helicopters was firing machine gun bullets at the forest, trying to force this thing out, because from the 2D, 3D radar, they knew exactly how to pinpoint it. That's that. Do you understand what I'm saying, David, Sacha?
Yeah. It
seems to me they were able to target it and manipulate it, and with all the other aircraft sort of like forming a perimeter around it with the Chinooks, one Apache helicopter was told, I remember someone telling me this, said it was hovering so low close to the house, it was just low and below the trees. And it seems to me very clearly that they were trying to force this thing out, using the machine guns, right? Finally got it to come out. And then, of course, what's Apache's main thing? It can hide below, come up out of nowhere, and just target you and hit you with something very powerful. And that's where, Caz, I do believe, has got this correct, a Brimstone missile has been used. Yeah. Because it's a very small missile. It's only about 6 or 7 feet, and it can be mounted very, very lightly, and it goes subsonic speeds, which is about 1,000 odd miles an hour at least, very quickly, and the way it can impact the target is very specific. It can either explode on impact, explode before impact, or it can impact the target and explode it from the inside. Whatever they use that night, clearly it was able to shoot it back down to the forest, and that's what caused all. That's what I think happened.
One thing is clear, that it was not a simulated munition.
No.
The Apache was caught in its own kinetic wave, which is why it had to do an emergency landing at Cardiff International Airport. And such was the size of the kinetic wave, it set the car alarms off in neighbouring villages. This was not a small explosion. No. This explosion was enormous. We're not just talking car alarms in Llantrisant, but in Vader and Talbot Green and in neighbouring villages, all of the car alarms were set off by this kinetic wave. It's, not just one or two. When you look out your window and all the car alarms are going off in the street, that's a huge shaking going on. Mm-hmm. So simulated munitions do not have any kinetic energy at all. And it was very kind of Richard Hall to actually go out in June of 2016 to film the police counter-terrorism drill where they were letting off fake or simulated munitions. And I've seen more smoke, to be fair, firework. And the noise certainly didn't register on the Richter scale 40 miles away in Monmouth. And this explosion did. I mean, that is an enormous explosion. And I think the reason why it registered on the Richter scale, even though it was an air explosion, was because it shook the Royal Glamorgan Hospital, which, as you know, goes down multiple levels underground. And an earthquake will register from a fixed subterranean location. And that's why it registered on the Richter scale, because the hospital itself shook. And this was no small explosion to be heard from 5 miles away. I heard it here in Pentyrch. But it was an enormous explosion. And they clearly shot at something. And the only thing that went in that direction was the green object that first came out of the pyramid that deliberately got the plane's attention to follow it. I believe it was a deliberate decoy or a sacrifice to draw the aircraft away from the pyramid itself and the load that it had jettisoned. And the fact that those objects were trying to hide from the helicopters, I think, is quite sad. If the Cole Winston witnesses do have the video, and it does turn out to be real, I'd very much like to see it. I think the world should see it, because this object, this pyramid, flew over their house. And it had some of these barrel-shaped objects with it. One of the green barrels tried to hide in the field next to their house, and the helicopters were sweeping left and right across the field, searching for it. And just as they were almost upon it, it's jumped up and skipped away westward again. In fact, all of the barrel-shaped objects were herded together by the military, and they were pushed west. They were witnessed in Bettus, in Bridgend, heading west. They were witnessed in Port Talbot, heading west, being pursued by military jets and helicopters, basically being pushed out to sea. As I say, the military would never exceed a NOTAM. A NOTAM is there as a notice to airmen so that other aircraft are not put in danger by military aircraft. Nobody's allowed inside the NOTAM area, just military aircraft, but they would never exceed it because they would be putting other aircraft at risk. But they did that night by over 50 miles. Over 50 miles, and they continued going west and out to sea. They actually went over Swansea and out to sea.
Well, one report that I got is, that I saw in a comment, they probably went as far as West Wales, all the way down to the coast of, what do you call it, Tenby area.
No.
So, what were they doing that far out, like? It don't make any sense.
Massively exceeded the NOTAM, which in an exercise they would never do. This was not an exercise, this was real life. And the NOTAM was put in at the last minute, just inserted in the last minute. There was no mention for South Wales in Exercise Chameleon. Exercise Chameleon was listed for Durham in the north of England, 310 miles away. And the week before the incident here, there was no mention of South Wales then. And they would never do an exercise over a residential area in the early hours of the morning for one reason: in case of accidents. We've got Stenbridge just up the road, 30 miles up the road, which is MOD land. If they want to go and blow themselves up, they're quite welcome to do so. But they would not do it over a residential area next to a hospital.
Well, you'd hope not, no.
The only reason they would do it is if they were there for if they were there for real life. They would never, ever, ever do it I mean, they would never do it over a residential area at night, because, as what Caz said, the fear of damage to human life or the accidents and everything. They've got plenty of lands they can practice on anywhere they want, and yet they chose. When we asked them in an FOI, they said, certain landscapes meet the criteria that we need in order to conduct operations, or something to that effect. But I'm like,
land features.
This is Wales, for God's sake. This is a Valley's area. You've got so many areas of the same thing. What is this mountain 10 feet taller than that?
There was an accident that night. That Apache helicopter had to do an emergency landing at Cardiff International Airport with its cockpit on fire. This is one of our best gunships, and one of the best gunships in the world. And there it is with a cockpit on fire, having to do an emergency landing at Cardiff International instead of RAF St Athan, which is just a few miles away. So there was an accident that night, and God forbid it went into somebody's house or they didn't make the airport, But the fact is that they used live munitions that night. Certainly they used live munitions, which is illegal. They're not even allowed to carry live munitions over a residential area, let alone use them.
Well, there's something else to add to that, isn't there? We've mentioned this a few times, but can you imagine you're a surgeon and you're working on a very delicate part of someone's body at night, or a long surgery that goes through at night, and suddenly the hospital shakes and you're like, oh my God, I've just slipped, you probably nicked an artery or damaged someone in surgery. I mean, this is one of the things that it's one of the things that we're finding out with the FOIs now. I mean, is it okay to talk about this, Caz, with the notifications?
I wouldn't discuss what we're doing right now.
Okay.
I want to concentrate on holding them in contempt at the moment for not anything else.
But it's certainly something you wouldn't think of,
I can say that.
Yeah, with the surgeons.
I can say this much, I mean, it's like they would never do it even for those reasons, I mean, if you're in intensive care or you're performing surgery, you certainly wouldn't do that. That's one of the reasons you wouldn't do it over a residential area. Because you can imagine the headlines in the morning. Army causes hospital surgeon to deform a patient in surgery or something.
Hence the backfilling. And they do perform neurosurgery at the Royal Glamorgan Hospital. That's one of the things they do. And microsurgery, whether it be brain surgery or spinal surgery, they do this under a microscope, for God's sake. If that building shook and they were doing an operation at the time, they could have easily given somebody a stroke or paralysed somebody.
Hence
that
it's not just, the thing with it's not just the cars jumping. I mean, the one thing that made me stand out, two things from the comments, especially that one person in Richard Hall's thing that night. He didn't just say, oh, there was a little shaking. He said the walls shook, the big, thick wooden doors, the fireproof ones shook. The fixtures and the windows were literally rattling like someone playing a bass guitar very loud, you ever seen a brrr kind of thing? You're not just talking a small thing here. And something else that's come up since, Laura Roten of the Paranormal Scholar, yes?
Yes.
Amazing video, and it's garnered a lot of attention, a lot of comments, and some of them are very, very well thought out and well detailed. They say to us that... the amount of paperwork that would be needed to conduct an exercise of this scale, the amount of assets, the military assets on the ground, in the air, and everything else, would be phenomenal. I mean, just to even get one helicopter in the air was like a week's worth of paperwork and a headache of signatures and everything. And you're talking something like that was like a small invading army over here. And as much as I hate to say this, on Metabunk, right, they did bring up one interesting point, but then I immediately found how stupid it was when they said it's customary for the military to clean up the mess that they make. I didn't realise, right, it was customary for them to remove rubbish from the Lanchester Common that's been there for years, right, that the council have been asked to remove for years and years, and yet along comes the army. We ask them in an FOI, why did you gather all the scrap metal that's been there for years and put it into a neat pile to be moved away? They hid behind Section 26. It's not in the public interest to know why it is they must collect rubbish. That's usually the council's job.
Well, the interesting point there, since you brought up the metal search, is that people have gone out with metal detectors on the common in recent months, and they haven't found as much as a bottle top. Nothing. Absolutely nothing metal has been found on that common. That night, they did a meticulous metal search. Every piece of metal that was on that common was picked up, and what they didn't need, they neatly cut up and stacked along the roadside. I have spoken to a witness that lives in the area that filmed and photographed what the military was doing that night. I would like that person to get back in contact with me. They do have a video. I would very much like to see it. And again, their identities will be kept anonymous if they don't want to be known publicly. And I will promise to do that, as I have with all the other witnesses, until such time as they can or will come forward.
And I'll just say also that since me and Caz have been doing this, a lot of people have told us anonymously things, and we've never revealed their names. We've never broken secrecy or anonymity. You can rely on us that much, you know. We will never ever reveal your details if you only choose to let us, you know what I mean? So, because I know people have got information that would help this case immensely, but it's just a question of trust and whether or not, you know, they're willing to come forward. But I've always said, me and Caz have never broken anonymity. We've never revealed anyone's identities or secrets, unless, of course, instructed to do so. So I hope that will encourage. You can go to the website, you can post anonymously, you can tell us what you know, and we'll take it from there. You know, so there's...
I've already said, you know, people don't need to tell us their real names. I'm really not interested in people's real names. If they don't want to be known publicly, then for their own protection, if they feel they don't have to tell us their name, they really don't. But any bit of information is valued information. You know, just to find out that all the car alarms went off in neighbouring villages may have seemed incidental to some people, but to us, it proves the kinetic wave. Not only with the shaking of people's homes that shook people awake in their beds, in their homes, but to set car alarms off in neighbouring villages means that explosion was huge. And of course, you can't put a simulated mission in the air, which is...
Well, let's talk... I mean, with this, when you say simulated, Caz, isn't it? It's also like with the EMF. I mean, when we first did the EMF, it was just a means of looking around the Pentyrch Fields area where you and David saw that large craft and the path it took and everything else. I mean, we came down there a few times, and then finally we got an EMF detector, and we started looking around, and it was like all the surrounding fields, bar the bush by the gate entrance and the tree. Yeah, those two had signals. But once we got into the area where the craft had been seen, moving along left to right, that's where we found a ton of signals, didn't we?
Yes.
And then we mapped it all out. Now, what I'm getting at here is, I wanted to make sure that when we did this, it was very thorough, right? We did metal detector searches. I was looking at British Geological Survey maps, even ancient burial maps or something. Is there anything in this ground that will tell me that there's a false positive reading coming from somewhere? Underground cables, water flow or something, anything. And I could not find nothing at all. And I did the same thing for Smilog Wood. Now, some of our work got put into doubt later on because someone was suggesting that the EMF detector that we used was not calibrated to the certain specific range. And I was like, well, hang on now, no. I know that EMF thing works right. There's no one is going to tell me that we did not go thoroughly through every procedure that would allow us to say that our EMF was not accurate. It was accurate, okay?
I think what it is there's a no-name brand of EMF detector that looks very similar to the one that we used, and that is faulty. The no-name brand doesn't work. And I think that's what they were implying, was that the EMF detector that we used was that brand, or unnamed brand, I should say, when it wasn't. And Gary has done a fantastic job by testing the EMF meter that we used with a more expensive one and this no-name brand against television sets and, you know, electricity meters. And
microwaves. Yeah,
and the one that we used is actually giving the same reading as the more expensive one, and the no-name brand doesn't actually work at all. So whoever made the complaint on Amazon that the no-name brand doesn't work was absolutely right. But we double-checked it, and we had to double-check our equipment to ensure that our readings were correct, and they were. And 20 months after the event, EMF in those fields was still harmful to human beings because the whole team were made ill from being in there. From headaches and nausea to burning skin and burning eyes, you know, and dizziness and disorientation, and all of these. This is from the EMF. It's awful.
Well, it's not just that, is it? It's that obviously we scanned the Pentyrch fields quite a lot because it's just you know it's not too far away from where you are. But the Smilog Woods one, right? I mean, what was interesting is I did the same thing. This is how, you know, because I keep telling people, right? Once we eliminated all possible things. Right, whether it's a tower or electrical cable or something under the ground. We've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb. Now it's like, we need to map it out. So we mapped it all out with a grid reference search, left to right, up and down, across the fields, in 2 sections each. And you see the map in the book. We found clusters, and then we found a trail, and amazingly, the trail follows the path that Caz and Dave said the craft went on that night. And where the hand of lightning came down, that's what we call the ball patch. Now, what's really interesting also is that, I'm surprised we found this, is that when we went to Smilaug Woods, right, and where and I think it was Steve, you'd found a trail of broken canopies and other branches, and it led right into that impact site. And of course, you have video of that, and that's where your hairs turn white.
Yeah.
We've gone into that area about 20 months, 22 months, maybe 2 years to the day, scanning that area, because it takes a while to do this stuff, You don't just do it in one day. You've got to do multiple scans, and obviously when you're doing multiple scans in an area that's got EMF harmful to you, you're getting very sick as well. And the point I'm making is that over time, I find the trail that comes from the impact sites that goes all the way back to Lantriston Common. And of course, if you follow it in, it goes to the impact site. You can't make that up. But then you see the trail in the second and third field in Pentyrch that follows the line of the craft that Caz and Dave saw, and it impacts highly at the point where the lightning came down, the hand of lightning that Caz described, to try and stop itself. That was the strongest point of it all, and over time, all that's dissipated. It's completely gone. You cannot find it anymore, and it's just amazing, right? You cannot make that up. You can't falsify it. You can't synthetically duplicate it. You can't do nothing, right? Either that's there naturally, or something has put it there. And seeing as that we've ruled out all man-made stuff and all natural-made stuff, the only option left is that this was a craft that had some anti-gravity kind of technology with an incredible EMF field surrounding it, right?
Yes.
Given its size and shape and everything. That's why I'm not surprised it left it there, but when Caz and Dave were describing it to me, I said, I wonder if it's still there. And yeah, you read it in the book, you see it on the website, you see it in the presentation. One presentation that I did do, a video that was separate to all the others, but I called it the EMF enhancement video, just to show how we did all this. And you can't make it up. It's impossible. I don't care what anyone says. You can say it's a faulty meter, but I've already disproven that one. What's left? What is left? I mean, that is a significant piece of evidence right there. You tell me what's left.
And the interesting point is, as well, is that 2 days after the book went live, bearing in mind that I've been here for over 20 years now, that the field where the bald patch is was absolutely levelled by an unknown farmer. He was not the usual farmer, and they have levelled the field completely. There is a video on my Facebook page of that, the day it actually happened. Again, evidence of absence, is it, where they just want to destroy everything? As they did with the trees in Smilaug Woods.
Well, the timing is a bit suspicious, isn't it?
Yes, very.
Literally, it's either literally 24 or 48 hours. I went up there myself, I had a look around, I was like, what on earth?
Yeah.
There's nothing in that. I mean, look, if you're going to say the farmer did it to increase grazing opportunity for the sheep, well, I'm not being funny, the sheep don't spend that much time in there anyway. They're in the other fields where there's plenty of grass. There's no reason to destroy that area or to cut it or trim it or anything. They've gone in there and they've cut all the snakeweed grass type of stuff, and they've just left a little outline of the ball patch area, but they've destroyed it.
Yeah, they haven't touched the surrounding fields.
No, they've destroyed it. They've destroyed that evidence, and I basically don't see why now, because there's nothing there. I was referring it to the patch after a while because the EMF signals are gone. The grass and the flowers are really starting to grow back. Maybe that's why they did it, because now it's looking healthy again. But obviously it ain't, because they decided to chop it down.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? Everything you've said. It just makes it weirder and weirder. And it's certainly a massive case. I don't really understand how it's avoided mainstream media. To be bigger than it actually is.
Well, I think with all things with the mainstream media, they all seem to be reading from the same song page. And if your evidence doesn't fit their official narrative, you're not going to get heard by the mainstream. I have done some filming with Sky. I've also done some filming with a reputable firm in Canada, and I can't say any more than that at present because I'm still under contract. And needless to say, it will be aired. Some of it will be aired later this year in the autumn, and some of it will be aired in Canada and the northern United States next year. So hopefully, more people will get to hear about this case. I have been shadow banned. I'll give you a little example of that. A paranormal scholar who did the short documentary film for me, I've had 815,000 views on that video. So the Pentyrch incident information is very hard to find. Gary couldn't find me for 20 months, and I wasn't hiding. Just that I've been shadow banned when that one video alone has had 815,000 views.
Wow. And you know how I am with searches. I can find a lot of information on the internet because I understand how their algorithms and their meta tags and their various words actually work. But it's just amazing. I mean, you type in Caz Clarke or Caz or Merthyr or something, nothing was coming up. And even though people were talking about it on South Wales Awakening, and there was talk about it on the Wales Online, and some bits of it were being shared here and there. It's like, I know Caz is using a Facebook account to post comments on that line. Why can I not find her on Facebook? And even the people who were answering her or seemed to be agreeing with her, I thought they seemed to be using a social media account. Couldn't find them as much. I did look for them as well, but it's like I couldn't find no one. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, she couldn't have blocked you, could she? Because she didn't know you. Because she didn't know who you were.
No, I didn't block anyone. I had no idea at all. In fact, the link was only made when that very small UFO group in Wales had posted a blog to say they were going to do a skywatch on top of the Garth Mountain. And I placed a comment underneath simply to say it's a good place to be. And that was where they were able to make contact with me. But I wasn't a member of any UFO groups at all because I had no interest in the subject at all. So it really did turn my world upside down, and I concur with Sacha 100% how it changed my life. I had no idea that I had post-traumatic stress until really I caught myself when I ripped into that commanding officer from Vodafone. And I just went from 0 to 100, and then I realised actually there's something wrong. It's changing me as a person. I look back at some of my presentations, the one that I did in Cornwall, for example, and I cringe because I am so angry. And I think it's time that we did get angry. I mean, it's time that we actually took it forward and started to ask our government seriously for answers. Because nothing is getting done. It seems that some groups are only interested in collating the information and not doing anything with it. And there are thousands of people in this country that have been affected. Millions of people across the world have been affected. And it's high time that we were told something instead of this blanket denial that still goes on today. And it's getting serious if they're shooting these things down.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the last time you were on the show, I knew you'd been through a tough time, but I didn't realise quite how much you'd been through until you explained it, and I was quite shocked actually. You seem to have gone through a tough time, very much like Sacha did. That's why another reason that I like having you both on the show together.
I actually sought Sacha out because I have such an affinity with that woman. She gave me some really brilliant information, and I've never forgotten her words when she said, "Caz, it's a process. And eventually you will come out the other side, but how long that will be, no one knows." She's an extremely wise woman. If I have any questions, it's Sacha that I go to. I think she's absolutely brilliant at what she does. I absolutely do feel that we've gone through a very similar experience together. It's affected us in a very similar way. I still have PTSD. I know Sacha still has PTSD. And we're
23 years now, yeah.
I sought her out because I know Sacha doesn't take any messing about from anyone. And if someone is a liar, Sasha is the one that will find them out.
And I know for a fact that you just saying what you said, Sasha won't be feeling big-headed about all this. She'll sort of feel quite pleased that you said it, but not in a big-headed sort of way.
She's my go-to.
Yeah.
You know, I sought Sasha out because I know that she can smell a liar at 1,000 paces.
I can't say that's always been the case, but now, after what I've been through with liars, even Nick Pope said that I got trolled more than him, worse than him. I thought that was saying something. I couldn't see it from the outside, so I don't know what it looked like, but I know how it felt, yeah. It's crazy.
But as you know, it comes with the territory, doesn't it? When you start kind of making whether it's a big name or a little name, you're going to get your trolls, whatever, you know.
Yeah, I know. If you're, changing something, if you're telling people that the things that they believe are not right, people don't like that, but actually quite a lot of people are willing to, change their mind. And then some people definitely will never change their mind and will just be horrific,
I've always said I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to inform people. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I wanted the evidence to be as it is. I didn't want it to be corrupted by anybody. I wanted people to be able to see it for themselves. At the moment, they're trying to hide behind exemptions, and they've actually said, this is South Wales Police in their latest one, that they can neither confirm or deny that they hold the information. Well, that's not how a Freedom of Information request works. That's the heading. They either confirm they have the information, but they can't give it to us because of certain exemptions, or they deny they hold the information. But they cannot say, we can neither confirm or deny, because that would go across the board with any freedom of information, and nobody would ever get any information, So they really don't know what they're doing, and I do. Gary and I will be drafting this latest FOI to South Wales Police, actually stating that the exemptions that they've given already will be classed as a refusal, and if they fail to answer this one, we will be writing to the Commissioner and holding them in contempt, and they could face criminal charges. That is the bottom line. They will answer me because I know this was real.
Yeah, interesting times to come.
And it's serious. Oh yeah, there's lots to come, and as I say, they keep digging, and the deeper they dig, the more lies they tell, the worse it gets for them. The truth will always prevail, David.
Yeah,
always.
Absolutely. Okay, you are best. Now, the book is available on Amazon, as you said.
It is.
It's called. Is it just called the Pentyrch Incident?
It is called the Pentyrch Incident, the greatest UFO cover-up of modern times.
That's it. So anyone.
We dropped the UFO bit because everyone knows what it is now.
Yeah. There are going to be people out there, international people out there, that don't know what the Pentyrch Incident is. So what I'll do on the Paranormal Dimensions page, I'll put links to the book and everything, and if you'd like to get anyone to get in contact with you, I can put links on there as well, Caz and Gary.
If anybody out there that needs help with anything, even if they just want to talk about their experience, then please contact us, and we have counsellors waiting to take their calls.
I'll put all the links and things that I can, and it's been great having you and Gary on, and you again, Sasha. Thanks for coming on, and always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
and hopefully we can.
So glad you made it.
Hopefully we can all meet up in a few months.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, maybe one day you'll get down to Pentyrch. That would be nice.
That would be lovely. Yeah, I'd have to try and put that on my agenda one day, because. As I say, I haven't been to Wales for probably a good 10, 15 years now, I should think. It must be probably about 12 years since last time I went to Wales. So I'm probably...
I would definitely leave it until the summer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what you mean, yeah. But maybe next year.
Hopefully the second phase of the investigation should be completed by next year.
Right.
But, it took the police 3 years to answer us the last time, so I don't hold that.
Now, do you foresee another book follow up to this, or do you think?
There is a possibility. I mean, I had to reduce the information in this book from 900 pages down to 297 pages because it was just too much.
So it could actually be you might get another edition, which is like an expanded edition or something.
Yes, very possibly. At present, we are working on the second phase of the investigation, which is going extremely well. I mean, the lies that they just keep telling just get worse for them. And in some cases are absolutely hilarious. So I would like to say more about that phase, but I can't at the moment. Because we are waiting for answers. Well,
what we could do is maybe when you do know a bit more, perhaps maybe next year, maybe in the middle of next year or something, perhaps we'll see where we are now and perhaps come back on the show again.
Oh, it'd be amazing. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, and Gary as well. And,
I was just gonna say, you know, if people are wondering why can't we say nothing now, I mean, you can see, just even with the release of the book, you know, we had someone, before the book even got sold, there was already someone posting a negative comment on it, a 1-star thing, and it was like, you haven't even read the damn thing yet. It's not even on. I did
see something about that, and someone was saying, oh, it was just a military exercise and all that, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then, 2 days before the book was published, that was posted up there.
Yeah, but then, you know, as soon as the book gets published within 24, 48 hours, the field gets cut down. So clearly someone is monitoring what me and Caz are doing.
Yeah.
Right? Whether legally or illegally, I don't know.
No, I'm not joking when I say I've kicked the police off my page. I've kicked the CIA off my page, and I find that hilarious. And that is the truth.
Yeah, it is.
Some of you have done that a few times. You probably more, Caz, anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's, you know, they've asked me questions specifically about the investigation, and I just tell them I'm not at liberty to discuss it because I don't want to give them the heads up.
Yeah.
You know, as to what we're doing.
Because if they learn what we're doing, then they sort of like run to those areas like, oh, you know, change this, do that, blah, 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 you know, so we want to keep them on their toes and let them walk on eggshells a little bit.
Well, we tried to cut them off before they had that opportunity. You know, the same as we did with the men and women that came and camped in the fields here. The first thing I got Gary to do was to check whether or not there'd been any planning permission for said campsite. To cut that avenue off so that they couldn't later go back and add, or yes, you know, Vodafone had this planning permission to camp there when clearly they were military. You know, only the military can hide behind Section 26. And what was so important that they had to come and camp and search the fields of Pentyrch in forensic suits using ground penetrating radar and triangulating satellites into this area, you know, armed. By the way, they were armed. So,
well, I guess on that note, so hopefully we'll get you back on the show again, you know, middle of next year maybe, and hopefully we should know exactly where we are by then.
Well, hopefully if we have our answers, yes, and if not, the police will be held in contempt, and that should be interesting.
Well, yeah, or we'll be in the middle of a big court case. Anyway, right, we better leave it there.
Right, well, I'll catch you soon,
right,
guys.
okay, yeah, good night all. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
cheers, bye-bye. Speak to you all soon.
Lovely.
Take care of yourself all. Bye-bye. Have you all gone? Oh, right, okay. Anyway, you've been listening to Paranormal...
No, it's still here.
Right, good night all. You've been listening to Paranormal...
Bye, everyone.
Right, this is a bit of a mess.
Paranormal Dimensions.
You've been listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm David Young. Thank you for listening on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Shut up. Right. All right, all.
Unidentified flying objects, commonly known as flying saucers, do exist. Some kind of flying objects have been photographed in the sky. If they cannot be identified as objects known to man, what are they? If they are not man-made, who made them? If they are not from this planet, where are they from?
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you. Fine.
I remember my daughter Kerry saying to me, you know, Dad, one day I'm going to be able to walk down Union Street and I'm going to be able to say, my dad's not mad. Look at what he said. Look at what is happening. He was right.
After 30 years, thank God! Thank God I've never seen you on Morgan when I was like a teenager, and I thought, oh my God, I said that man, even then.
Oh, thank you.
So, and now, thank God. Thank God.
You've been so kind to everyone.
No
so
problem.
Patient.
No.
Thank you very much.
Have a picture with
Of course, yeah. Which one, that one?
Yeah.
Who's it for?
Yeah, that's Joe.
Hey!
You're my hero.
Oh, you're mine. Hey!
Brilliant work you're doing.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Oh, it's all yours.
We love you. Can we get a selfie?
Go on,
You're
then.
so amazing.
Go on then.
Oh, well
Thank
done.
you.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey!
Cheers, mate. I've been following you for years. Keep up
Cheers,
the good
mate.
work.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you, mate.
How good does that feel to say that they're not laughing at you now?
They're not laughing at me now.
No, they're not.
They're trying to ignore me. The sight of these people in these vast numbers walking through the London streets saying we're not having it anymore it's so freaking emotional, you know. You know, I've done some things in my life, but you know, this is an incredible day for me to have seen all those years ago, those decades ago, where no one wanted to know and everything you said was crazy, and now you see the world waking up on this scale. So you know, the whole COVID era has been a fascistic nightmare, but it has woken people up to the fact that there are forces running human society that are not the people they see, and we have an opportunity now to turn that, seeing that, into ceasing to cooperate with it. And if the kind of numbers we're starting to see cease to cooperate with the diktats of authority and fascism, then the numbers alone mean it cannot prevail. So this is a fantastic, pivotal day. And a day that gives you enormous encouragement for where we go from here. Hey! Hey! How are you, man? Hi! Can I get a picture of you? Yeah, of course. I love this. Thank you. How the police should be.
wait and see.
The coronavirus pandemic started in China. Oxygen, medical supplies and hospital staff have
one of the 5 vaccines and research.
Stage 1, you create a problem. It could be a manufactured virus. You want a reaction, and you want them to either say, do something, or you want them to accept what the authorities suggest must be done. So one of the agendas is to massively cull the population. They want to reduce the numbers.